This is episode 52 of the Fire Protection Podcast, powered by InspectPoint. Today, my guest is Matt Bass. Matt is a fire protection influencer in the fire protection industry. I met him probably through some of the Facebook groups a few years back, and he's a very big influencer and admin in a bunch of the groups out there. A lot of information passed around the industry from just technicians in the field to office people to design and engineers. So it was cool to have Matt on and talk about the industry, get into kind of where he started, but also kind of where the industry is going. So yeah. Make sure to like, subscribe to the podcast. There's a lot more to come, putting a little bit more content out this fall. InspectPoint's got a bunch of new features that we're rolling out this fall as well. So, reach out to me or just request a demo. There's some really cool stuff that we're doing within the inspection and service side of fire protection. So on to the episode. Take care. Live here with Matthew Bass, the Matt Bass. I like your profile down there from the Zoom bar. Welcome to the Fire Protection Podcast.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been meaning to get you on here for, I don't know, probably a couple of years. I remember talking to you a couple of years ago, and just it's funny where you're heavily involved in a lot of different social groups, and I'm going to call you a fire protection influencer, even though you might not think so. But yeah, it's good to finally get you on one of these podcasts.
Yeah, like I said, glad to be here. I love talking fire shop, so whenever I can do it, I'm sure my wife hates it. I'm sure all of our wives hate it. Go out in public and they're like, just tell me what's wrong. I already see you looking up. Are you looking around?
It's the looking up thing, right? It's like as soon as you do this, you're like, uh-oh, I got a dirty look.
Like she really hates it when we go to restaurants and they have like the enunciator right at the entrance. Like you walk into Applebee's and you have the little keypad. She's just like, don't even look. I see it's yellow. Don't look. And it's like I gotta look. I know what it is. So
Yeah, you got to see what you're in for, just in case something happens.
yeah, it's all safety. So
I went into a like Broadway, like a theater, I don't know, in the last year or something in New York, and I especially in those theater settings, it's just kind of, I don't know, it gets you as a fire protection professional. You're in this group of people, like, all right, how do I get out of here if anything goes wrong? There's those old theaters are, there's usually a deluge system on the
yep.
stage, but it's really, there's no sprinklers, so it's just fire alarm. So how do we get out? And they have a good method, and obviously emergency exits in some of the bigger ones, but it's kind of funny what goes through your mind in some of those public settings.
Exactly. Yeah. So for her, she doesn't understand. You just can't turn it off.
No,
Well,
I
who's
know.
going to do it?
So I guess tell the listeners about you. They might not know who Matthew Bass or Matt. Do you go by Matthew or Matt? Either.
Right, Matt is probably the best.
All right, Matt. So I guess I know people involved in the industry know who you are, but whoever's listening that doesn't know who you are, I guess give who you are, where you kind of came from, how you got into the industry.
Oh yeah, it's always a good quick question. Yeah, I've been doing it for 25 years now, which is kind of crazy to think when you start doing the math, you start doing the subtraction of when you started to where it is now. And I started when I was 19 years old. Got into fire protection like most of us, didn't even know it existed. Had a girlfriend that knew I didn't like what I was doing, and I told her I wanted to do a job Monday through Friday, but I didn't want to be in an office, which kind of
Right.
down quite a bit. So she had a cousin that did fire protection. And the funny thing was, I didn't know anything about fire protection, but I knew that they probably needed information about myself. So I went for a green helper position, which is usually like, you can just show up and if you're breathing, you'll get hired. I actually showed up with a resume for like a 7.25, an hour job. And I think the owner of the company looked at me and he didn't even look at it, and I was like so taken aback because I was like, oh my God, I spent so much time on that. And he didn't even look at it. And he literally asked me 4 questions. He's like, can you show up on time? Yes. Have you ever worked in construction? No. do you have a reliable car? Yes. And he said, do you have any tools? No. And then he's like, all right, you can start Monday. And I was like, okay, so started doing a sprinkler install, which I think was great because it gave a good foundation for a lot of what I have experience on, to see like the systems, from just blank pipe on the ground to actually hanging them and commissioning them. It was a small company, my first one, so we didn't have a service team. So the installers were also the service technicians. So at night we would run service calls, and I was very ambitious, so I took them all, which was also very helpful because if you take all the calls and then the one time you can't, the boss is very nice to you because you've taken the last 30 calls in a row.
Right.
So I got a lot of service experience, and a lot of it was by myself at night at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so you almost have to learn it because you're there by yourself. We didn't have Google and Facebook and other things that we could look up. Then kind of got into went to VSC Fire and Security because they were looking for inspectors, and I didn't know anything about inspections. And that's really kind of how I got into inspections. That's really my bread and butter has been since that point. And then I was very blessed in my career to have really good positive mentors, like managers and leaders around me. And my first real positive manager, his name was Kurt Dubach at VSC Fire and Security. He's the first one who got me to know about NICET. And that really propelled my career because he gave me a task of a $500 bonus for passing each level.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was 24, young, with a girlfriend that wanted Outback every Friday, and I was like, $500 bonus, give me all of them. That's kind of how I got started and got obsessed with NICET. So I thank him for getting pushing that button, because once he pushed it, it hasn't stopped since.
Yeah, no, that's great. What nice certifications are you?
I have NICET level 3 in water-based inspections. I have level 2 for special hazards. I have
Wow.
level 3 for fire alarm, and I have level 2 for ITM fire alarm. So
Wow.
I have quite a few of them. So people reach out to me quite a bit for advice because I've been doing it for, it seems like, a long time. So
That's great, from not from kind of randomly getting into the industry to being a high level NICET, and obviously everybody's go-to for tech questions a lot of times. I,
yeah,
I so weirdly enough, like those questions you got as a helper, those 4 questions, probably because of the lack of you know technicians in the industry, it's probably not that much different of a question set. Can you show up on time? Do you have a reliable car? Okay, we need you, right?
yeah. I mean, that's kind of what we're looking for anyways. I mean, just, can you show up, and can you be there, and can you be willing to learn? And that's why I joke, because I still think back, and I was like, I actually did a resume. I was like, oh my God, what was I thinking?
I know, I know. But now um I've seen you on social media like Facebook and other places. I think didn't you offer to, like, I've seen you post stuff out there like, hey, I'll take a quick shot at your resume. I'll help you out. That was I think I saw that at one point, right?
Yeah, I've done it quite a few times because I think with some of the groups, I've always tried to, I think, again, I was very blessed in my career. I had very good managers and mentors around me, and I always told myself that, look, these people took me under their wing. They didn't really have to if they wanted to, but they taught me a lot, and I've always wanted to, give that back to other people, to be a positive leader, to share what I know, because I think too often people sometimes can get like there's some job scared of passing on your information, and I truly would pass on everything, because if you can pass me, I think that's the ultimate
Yeah,
compliment to us, is that, like, hey, can someone that I trained eventually come back and tell me that they're making more money than me? I'm not going to be sad. I'm going to be proud of you. I'm going to be like, heck
yeah,
yeah. So I think, showing people that you can offer more than just expertise on like how to fix a dry system or fire pump, because right now there's a lot of companies that are looking for resumes, and some of these people have just never built a resume before. They don't even know where to
right.
start. And
Yeah,
just things like that I try to offer to help people, so they don't get into a situation where they just feel uncomfortable. They don't want to make a change or make a decision because they just don't know how to do it. And so I think offering people more helpful information, besides, again, just backup experience, or for like helpful on ITM, but like, hey, look, even for like your NICET, your work history. I had a gentleman just last night reach out to me that I've talked to for off and on for about 5 years, and this was our first time talking in person. And of course, the first phone call was like, "That's what you sound like," pretty cool. But he had a nice at work history question, and he said, I'll send you over my information. And could you review it? And I'm like, yeah, of course, and so I think offering other things to people beyond just, again, the help on experience, but like NICET, work history, the recertification process, just different questions that they, to have that resource to help, available to people, I think is great for our, for the people. Again, I can tell people seem to like it because I get asked questions. I just got asked a question about 2 hours ago. I have my 25 handbook right here open because the question that it almost kind of even stumped me a little bit. I had to go back to the main book and get some more information, but I'm gonna call him after about 2 o'clock to give him the answer. So,
Oh, that's great. What was the question?
on 5-year flow standpipe testing,
Okay.
because there's a lot of, because some of the wording I joke, I said, I'm a pictures person. That's why I love YouTube and videos, because you can stop and play it. But
Right.
these books are amazing, but I wish they would, have like more like demonstration videos, because I think that would help people to say, okay, that's what they mean there.
Right.
Because the words can be black and white, but sometimes, I think that's why YouTube is so popular with the videos, because you can see so many informational things, and you can stop it and record, stop, rewind it, fast forward. But
Yep.
you can also have that aha moment, go, oh, that's what they're talking about, and
Right.
so I'm going to try to help them out with the question. But that's what I try to do. I try to be positive where I can, and of course, some people know that you are going to get a little side of smart ass or sarcasm here and there, but that's that comes with it too. So,
It's part of the industry, right? You gotta have fun with it too.
oh yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, it'd be interesting to if NFPA. I don't think NFPA will ever get into videos. I know they obviously do some training, but it would be nice to throw videos out there of like real life. I mean, we could even do it with our platform potentially. On just the basics of this requirement per 25 or whatever you're doing, right? Um, and there's always a gray area. There's always going to be instances where it's not going to be black and white. But um, so social media wise, I think we talked about this on Dope and Tape last week when I was on. There's like 10 to 20,000 members on some of these Facebook groups, right?
Yeah, the main one that I kind of help on is the NFPA 25 Inspectors Forum.
Yeah.
I think there's almost 8,000 members across, and it's not just the United States, it's Canada. There's other countries that are represented. The one that's called NICET Fire Alarm Online, I think they have 11,000, almost 12,000 members in there, and there's other ones for special hazards, and they have other groups as well. There's even one for like NFPA for 10 for extinguishers. Just and that's kind of how I enjoyed those groups, is knowing that I can talk to people and see or hear that whatever I'm experiencing or going through is almost similar to what someone over in, Seattle, Washington, somewhere so far away from us. And, I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, and to hear that someone is experiencing the same thing or having the same problem with a valve or a system or a panel, I think that was just cool to know that there's others out there experiencing, what we're experiencing, that we're not alone. So
No,
I think that was one of the biggest draws I had, is that you could post something and be like, oh, okay, so I'm not the only one experiencing this issue with, whatever.
right. Yeah, I didn't even know about that nice at fire alarm online. Like that's crazy. I just by the way, I just put in my application to be a member. But
Yeah,
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 I've been in
the main guy, Kyle, he runs that. I think his name, Schumer. I'm gonna slaughter his last name, but
yeah,
Kyle's the main guy, and he has a lot of good content. He even has some helpful stuff for NICET. They do quite a bit, but one of the things too I love about the groups is that they also, most of the people don't understand how much is actually in the group itself. But like in our NFPA 25 group, we have a whole media section that has all the pictures from people that have posted stuff in the group from when it was first started. So you can scroll through and see just all this cool stuff, just actual examples of things that are out there, deficiencies, or
yeah,
things that people find. But there's also a file section where people like myself, if you go on the NFPA 25 group and look under files, a lot of the ones that have been uploaded are ones by like me and a few other people, where you can upload helpful, like people are always asking like, hey, which of these heads are on a recall list? And we've put all those files in the file group. And the groups are more than just going in and talking. And even in the NFPA 25 group, if you go on there, there's a video I made a few years ago kind of explaining the whole gambit of what's available for each of those groups, just to make sure people understand just how much value these actually could have for you. So
Yeah, they've been super valuable for even us at on the software because you get a lot of times you don't get the feedback, right? And those are open feedback where you can learn about different products, just different instances in the field and what people are running into. And then what happens is they comment, 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 and again, we essentially take a lot of that feedback and hey, this would be a cool new feature to add, or this would be a new feature to add, or hey, let me reach out to this person to get more details on that. Um, but it's a great community to be a part of. And I know there's a bunch of them, just not NFPA 25. There's extinguisher ones, there's suppression ones, there's obviously fire alarm ones.
Yeah,
So
there's even ones for, like sprinkler head collecting, which is a big thing for, people
oh
to
boy,
post pictures for all the heads they're collecting over the in this, and there's some people like there's a guy named Danny who's from Canada. He and I are pretty close. And I'm always kind of roasting him once in a while because I said, how do you have time to find all these heads and do work too at the same time?
that's
Because they're
funny.
but even some people will ask about the groups and they're saying, oh, but it's Facebook. And I said, if you actually, because you can go into each of these groups and look, once you get into them, you can actually go in to see all the members, and you'll be surprised how many high level people from our industry are actually in there. There's like the Bob Caputos, the Tracy Bellamy's,
Yeah,
the Tom Paces. And I tell people, if these didn't have legit helpful information, I don't think those industry titans would not would be in these groups. And you see Tom, and the thing I do enjoy too is that those like people like a Bob Caputo, he'll chime in every once in a while,
oh
which is
yeah,
great to see. That see the president of AFSA or like a Tom Parrish. If you go on the
yeah.
fire alarm one, Tom is always commenting. Which again, I think it helps show people that even people of their level who formed our businesses, that we have, they're willing to step in and help out people with questions. And I think that solidifies those groups. Like if those groups didn't have value, you wouldn't see a Tracy Bellamy or a Ralph Bless or Tom Parrish or Bob Caputo in those groups. And so
Yeah.
that to me is also why I enjoy them, is because you have that kind of level in there willing to also offer their guidance to the masses. So
Yeah, and I was off Facebook for a while, but the groups brought me back in. It's actually one of the best things that Facebook did is brought in these groups, and it's just like these channels of people on whatever, and it's tremendously helped out to just different niches in life, right? So yeah, if obviously if you're listening, join up. Obviously, there's some credentials you got to put in, just that you're not gonna spam them or put up advertisements or whatever. But
yeah,
um,
even some of the groups I've posted things like, I'll see like a posting for like a supervisor position or a manager position, and I'll post it and just saying, hey, look, I'm trying to make this, more widespread so people can see it, more visibility to it. So if you have that desire to do that. And even one of the guys in the 25 group, I posted a position for it was a manager position for down in Antarctica to run
oh
the
wow,
fire down there. And to this day, he always thanks me and says, "Man, because of you, I knew that job was out there and I got it." And he always just says that thanks just for even posting it. So I even knew that it was available for me. Um, and so now he's the director down there, and he's always every
oh
time
that's awesome.
just to so the groups are not just for chatting, but I've posted job postings, to help out people to get again to say if you want to move into that role. And that's also things I've also offered to say, look, if you're looking to go from a tech field position into a supervisor manager, like let's if you need help with that transition, I'll be willing to help you because I had to do that myself. And so I think the groups offer just so much more, and people will post and even one of the reasons I even first got into the group was because of the networking availability through the groups.
Mhm.
Because for a while there, people at one of my companies were asking me, because other offices were using recruiters to find workers,
Yep.
and they came to my office and said, what are you doing different, because your recruiting balance is like zero, like you haven't used it at all. And I said, I'm recruiting through other means. And they're like, well, what are you doing? And I showed them, as soon as I mentioned Facebook, they all kind of laughed at me. And I'm like, no, but I'm finding people, I'm posting stuff like, hey, we're looking. And if you do it the right way, you can post actual positions. And there's even one of the groups is for job positions for fire protection, and you can post
Wow.
positions there. And and through the networks, I've met people and say, hey, where do you live? And they're like, oh, I live in this state. And I'm like, well, I have an opening in that state.
Yep.
Would you be willing to just entertain it? And so I think there's a lot of value to it, and beyond just the stereotype of it's Facebook and it's just not useful, but to me, I've actually found it so useful that I use it daily. Of course, my wife sometimes gets a little angry when she's like, "Who are you helping now?" And I'm like, "Well, you know, so
Got to get your consulting hat, business going, next. Yeah.
so there's always that thought of monetizing it, but
Right.
honestly, I love because I think too it falls on my history. Like my parents were both educators, so
Okay.
I grew up in a house of just everything you should learn, you should teach to other people, and I just have a passion for it. I do it to this day. Like I said, I usually get about two messages every day from one of the groups of someone asking for advice,
Wow.
guidance, which again, I love that because if I know I can help somebody and they didn't have another avenue and I was, and also what makes it best for me to feel good is that I'm a total stranger to these people and
Yep.
they still feel the need that I can maybe help them out or point them in the right direction. So to know that these people reached out to me, they don't know me from, the next door neighbor or whoever, and they feel confident that maybe I can help them, that makes me feel good, that, I don't even know most of these people, but they still reach out. So
No, that's great. It's obviously something for you too, because you're empowering, and it's a good feeling. Obviously, going back to your education with your parents. No, that's awesome. So I was talking to the guys on the show the other day about, you know, f- I get, the Facebook stuff came up, and they're on Discord and some other ones, and I think there's opportunity. It's just
yep.
to go to other platforms. It's just there's nothing really set up for groups, and everybody's on Facebook. I think eventually something may happen. Um, but again, most people are on Facebook, and that's a tough way.
Yeah,
That's
I
the way
think
it's going.
yeah, and plus because I think it's so easy. I mean, because if you or I just wanted to make a group on something about fire protection, you can go and make a group right now.
Right.
It takes about 5 minutes to make a group, and then you can share it with your friends and other people,
Yep.
and so I think the ease of it and the fact that you can so many of us use Facebook, whether it's for personal or for business or for both. Like myself, I can friend people, and I can probably have I could probably do a group today and probably have 500 people in the chat, or at least in
Yeah.
the within probably a week time, just like, hey, come here, and so I think it's easier to set it up. And plus, so many of us, I think, like to entertain this knowledge. And so when you actually go into these groups, you can actually see like who are friends of yours that are in the group, and you'll notice almost most of us are probably in like 4 or 5 of the groups. We're not just usually like in one.
Right.
There's a lot of us that are covering a lot of groups, and then there's even groups for down to like specific panels. If you want to join a panel group on like for Honeywell or that kind of stuff
Yep.
to meet people that if you have a question that's specific to like a brand, there's
Yep.
even groups down to that level. And I just think that there's so much value that you can get from that, because you're talking to live people, all parts of the country, but again, dealing with maybe the same issue you're dealing with. And the volume that you can reach people, I think, is what makes it helpful for me, because I can talk to someone. I mean, actually, literally today I had a call from Alberta, Canada. I posted a question about something. I was looking for an answer, and the gentleman messaged me, and I said, "Hey, you mind calling me?" And he called me this morning, and we chatted. And he's a fire official up in Alberta,
Oh,
Canada, and
wow.
so those are things I just couldn't get, through maybe like a Discord or
Right.
I
Right. Right.
can reach so many people through Facebook, because this is again not just United States, it's Canada. I've talked to people in other countries, Great Britain and stuff like that. So it's to me it's a huge value because I can touch I can get to so many people quickly.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's the information age where everybody's connected, and you can literally Google or put in Chat GPT. Now you have obviously the social networks to get that knowledge out there. Um, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I look forward to I got to explore a few more now that you're mentioning all these different groups. Um, I just saw there's a Honeywell one that has 20,000 members. It's like, oh wow, all right, that's I'm never going to get hyper into there, but I like to look at the problems of the industry, and that's what we're obviously trying to solve. So you get the problems through there. You get the pros, you get the cons, people are kind of real on there, and they tell you how it is in the field. So
Oh yeah, and I think that's what I mean, because there's even industry people like Vince Powers from
yeah,
NSA,
yeah, I never say, yeah.
jumps in and he'll say, "Hey, can you all send me, pictures of your, sprinkler head deficiencies that where the bulb is leaked out or something?" And people will just start pumping all these pictures, and it's like, there's not a platform I think you can get that kind of response, and
No.
quick response. There's ones for sprinkler fitters for union. There's ones for non-union. There's so many out there that if you have a desire, and again, when you see 20,000 people in a group, I mean, there has been some value for those people to want to join that and be in that group for that long, So I think there's, some really good value that if people just took a chance and looked at it and just chimed in, and you probably see that yeah, you're going to get some sarcasm, some one-offs here and there, and it's even funny because in the NFPA 25 group, people know me now that they'll actually private message me and say, "Hey Matt, before I post this and you roast me like crazy, can you let me know if there's a good question?" I give them the blessing and say, "Yep, go with it. I won't roast you too bad." So
Yeah, because then you get people like, I don't know, being snarky about it. And it's like, it's got to be open because, not everybody's at the same level, right? So,
yeah, and even the gentleman who called me yesterday that had a question for his work history, I told him, I said, "Look, if most people could see me like when I'm actually typing the words, I'm actually probably laughing like 90% of the time. I'm one of those people." My wife always says, "Do you joke about everything?" It's like I love laughing, I love joking, I love having fun. So there's really not much seriousness behind anything. If I ever said anything, if I ever hurt someone's feelings, you have to almost know that behind that I was actually laughing. I was actually
yeah,
having a good time. I wasn't, again, trying to I'm more about helping the people, and
right.
again, that's a lot of times if a person has a question, I say, like, if you just call me, you'll once you hear my voice, you'll understand I'm here to help. I'm just a big jokester, and again, unfortunately, being in construction in the early age, my foremans taught me how to be a smart ass and sarcastic.
That's what I liked about the trades. That's what I like about the industries. It's can't be all serious, you got to have fun with it,
Yeah,
even if it's in the niche.
because even when people may hear like some curse words, I always tell them, but listen to the curse word. I'm not saying it to you. I'm describing something. I'm using it as an adjective. It's different
Right,
how you say it. It's,
right. So obviously great career, got nice at certifications, variety of different large companies in the kind of mid-Atlantic, Southeast. So what are you up to now? I know you're working at Amazon. What I guess what's different about that than what you were doing before?
yeah, it's a different opportunity because before I was working for contractors that were always looking out for work, always having to go get the next job or the next inspections, and so there was always a constant, you can never sit back and actually try to help a lot because you were constantly trying to chase the work, and obviously with most of the companies they're trying to run some kind of a profit, so you have to constantly
Right.
watch numbers, watch manpower, and after doing it for like 23 years, it started to kind of weigh on me a little bit because sometimes there was deciding where the profits lie versus doing it the right way sometimes, which is unfortunate, you know trying to make sure that we're doing it the right way, and especially too with a lot of the companies are getting gobbled up, and there's not as many just like outlying family owned companies. I mean, there's probably
Yeah.
still some more, but there's a lot of consolidation with companies right now, and it's more about, I think, to me, it's just a personal opinion, it's more about profits, and I think there's some of the other stuff's taking a back seat, and I just thought there was another way, and this opportunity came, kind of fell in my lap, and realizing that I could work for just one company and be on the other side where I'm more like a consultant, helping out
Hmm.
and going in the right direction, actually being able to use like the knowledge I have, because in my prior positions as managers and like that kind of, I was most of my job was really just to, bottom line was to produce profit for the company,
Yep.
take care of the customers and produce profit. And this is a little different. I can actually use my knowledge and my expertise to actually help and guide people in the right direction. So it's just a different side of it, and not having to chase like the work all the time it's nice. It's a breath of fresh air to actually say I can actually help people, and I can use the 25 years I've gained of install, service, and inspections to help and guide people in the right direction.
Yeah, there is a lot of consolidation in the market, and I think it's going to continue. Obviously, I mean, private equity world, which cares about profit, right? Is kind of taken over the industry. There's pros and cons to it. Um, and obviously the con is just like always looking at profit and maybe not fire protection all the time. Um, but I think there's some good to that too. It's just ha- I guess where do you see it going? Because I have some opinions on it. I'd be interested to see what your thoughts on I guess pros and cons of that consolidation and where does that go from here?
Yeah, that's a good question, Drew. And it's one I think a lot of us have looked at and talked about because sometimes you can go on LinkedIn and there's companies that are getting bought. And it seems like almost every week now. It's
Yeah,
kind of funny too because it's kind of spiked like the last 5 or 6 years because there was many years before this that you hardly ever heard about this many acquisitions so quickly.
yeah,
It's a little different pace than I think many of us were used to, and seeing that uptick like that kind of had me only worried just because you're taking so many of these individual unique companies and putting them all under one umbrella. And just because I've experienced that, I was with a company that acquired three other companies at the same time, and it was more of a battle than it was a coming together because it was who was going to be the dominant company, who was going to be the dominant team. And it really was not a path I wanted to go down because it seemed like it was more of a battle than it was, hey, we're one team. It was almost like because like one of the companies they put like two companies that actually did the exact same thing. It was like having like the Dallas Cowboys and the Washington Commanders and saying, hey, we're going to be one team. It's like that's not going to work. I don't care
right.
how you do that. It's going to be impossible to put that together and not have some issues. And
Yeah,
I just think with that kind of consolidation, I just don't see how you're going to benefit the business by bringing all these companies with different personalities, backgrounds, and then also be taking care of the customers and doing the right job.
right,
Right.
right.
I don't see how those two can play.
Yeah, I feel like we're in that, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. I think it's a good bad part of the industry, but what'll happen, and this has happened before, um, in the industry 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
When Simplex Cornell acquired, they were Tyco back in the day. Well, I started my career with, they were just acquiring everybody, right? And then they ended up, the managers and technicians and the field techs there, right? They go out and start their own company. So it's almost like this cycle
Yeah.
where because there's such a need for knowledge and labor within the space, they could go out and start their own thing, right? And they'll have to grow it, and they have those growing pains. And I think there's better tools for an owner operator, a small company, to really make a business these days. It's just like making that jump. How do you make that jump? And then there's also a generational age gap where you and I are kind of in that middle where there's there's a gap of there's a lot of fire protection professionals that are retirement age or are
Oh yeah.
getting
Yeah.
pushed out, right? And then so who fills that void? We're kind of that next generation, but there's also, who's behind us as well. So
Yeah, that to me is actually probably the bigger issue than anything else is that, 'cause I'm sure most of us have seen it, and I've actually posted it in the groups before, and it's like, how many of you have gone to a training, recently or to an AFSA meeting or some of the other, different meetings, and there's just not a good range of ages in there. There seems to be a
yes,
very high into one higher age group, and that's a good thing because they're the ones that probably help build our industry to what it is
yep,
today. But it also means they're going to probably be retiring in the next 10 years, and who's going to fill that, like you said, who's going to fill that gap, because even at NFPA, they had one of the training sessions was they're looking for new instructors to come on for NFPA to teach the classes. It's because, honestly, some of the Bob Caputos and Rob Blesses, I mean, they build our industry, but I'm sure they probably want to go play with their grandkids or something
yeah,
now and enjoy
yeah,
and have some time. And they need us now, our generation, to step in and start taking those leadership roles in either these companies or these organizations to provide the next level, and start, now us being those people in those leadership roles. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a gap. And also I think just how the industry has changed too, because people like myself, when I first came up, we started as installers, then we went to service, then you went to inspections. A lot of these companies now are just taking people right from green to inspectors, and they're almost expecting that they're going to give the same value of work versus the person who has experience. And it's like,
Right.
I think there's a gap there, because I've dealt with that personally, and I've seen too much where they say, well, how come so and so can't write up these deficiencies better and document everything we need to know of how to make a proposal? And I say, well, that person doesn't know what's above the ceiling or behind the wall, or
Right.
they've never done that. So how are you going to expect them to know all the components or all the what ifs that could be used to make a proposal, because
Yep.
they've done it? And that piece we're losing, because there's people like myself. When I wrote up my deficiencies for my inspections, most of the salespeople were like, "Oh my gosh, I can basically just put a number to this and send it out." But
Yep.
I gave them labor, all the details. I gave them material lists. I gave them everything they would need to do to get this work completed. Now, I
Right.
think we're losing that, because, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, obviously, we want people to have opportunities, but I think that informational background experience of installing it and servicing, I think we're slowly losing that, from our this new generation of people that are in our business.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's I think getting in the industry is important, and trying to obviously experience is big. I always gravitated toward the associations and try to learn as much as raise your hand, go to a training, want to go to these conferences because you learn a lot. The more exposure you are with, and if you get involved in the associations, they'll take anybody on, right? You go to these, if
Right.
it's local, go to these chapter meetings. They're in the evening. I know it's tough with everybody's time and families and all that, but you could do one every other month. Get out, meet people. And I think the number is like 30% or less people or contractors in the market are part of an association, which is, I think, is definitely dropped. Um, and there's consolidation going on too, so it's definitely going to drop even more. Um,
Yep. Oh yeah.
but all right, shifting over. Let's I could talk to you for hours about different things.
I could.
But
I'm the same way. Like I said, my wife sometimes goes, "Can we have one conversation without you either being interrupted on your phone from a text or a Facebook or a phone call?" She's like, "Can I just have my husband for like an hour this afternoon?" Like,
yeah, right. Well, I got you a few quick response. I call it the quick response round. Some quick response questions.
yeah.
Um, and the first one doesn't have to be quick. What's the coolest new product in fire protection? Doesn't have to be sprinkler. Doesn't It can be whatever. What is the kind of product out there that you think could change the industry?
It's gonna sound kind of funny, but flex heads. Oh
Okay.
my God. Yeah, I know that they've been around for a little while, but for someone like me who came through the industry and I had to actually nipple and 90 over the pipe and put a hanger on there and get it center of tile. I can't tell you how many times with my first foreman, he would come behind us and he was very particular. He said if they're calling for center of tile on the sprinkler head, it needs to be 12 by 12. And he would take out his stick ruler and go behind us and measure it. And if it was 11 by 13, you were redoing it. It had to be 12 by
Wow.
12. And seeing these flex heads where you can actually just get it centered like the first time and you're done. I mean, I'm so jealous of the guys and the gals that can do that, because we didn't have that. When we used to do install, we used to have competitions on who could pipe as many heads in, and we would just do that. But then again, my foreman would come behind us and measure each one and be like, he said, I should be able to look down that row of heads, and if they're all 12 by 12, I should only see one head. If I see any other head popping out, you're gonna fix it. And it's like, come on, Richard, and I'm just so jealous of that technology for flex heads, because I'm just jealous. I wish I had it when I was doing it. So
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, they've come a long way. I remember just being involved in New York City market, probably 5 to 10 years ago. They wouldn't even allow them, weirdly enough. I think they're finally allowed there, but it's just like it's an easy technology, right? And it solves a potential, it just makes it quicker.
oh yeah.
Um, more
I'm just
efficient.
jealous I never got to be able to use them because I just got out of install when they started coming on the market, and I was like, oh my God, do you know how fast I could have been installing those? You know,
Right, right. All right, next question. Favorite Star Wars movie or series?
oh yeah, I just watched. I'm big on Star Wars. As most people, it's actually funny because in the groups, people know I'm a Star Wars fan, and people will actually message me. Bill Hayes, he's one of the guys in the group. He actually sent me something just about 4 months ago. It was a tin can for like candy and cookies, but it had the Star Wars on there, and he sent it to me. And so I get stuff quite a bit from fans that know that I'm
Boy.
big into it. Uh, Best series I think is I'm gonna go with original. I'm an 80s kid, so one of my best memories was going with my dad to see Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
You know, I think I was 5 years old, but that memory with my dad I think was the best part, was just being with him. But then it was with the Star Wars, and it's never left my that's the other thing my wife laughs is that most people that know me, I'm big on collecting and that kind of stuff. And so I think when Toys R Us closed, I think I actually had tears in my eyes because that was my when I used to be an inspector. You get to go around to all the facilities, and when the GPSs first came out, my first boss said, "Hey Matt, I need to call you into the office. I have some questions on your travel paths. We have a little concern that maybe you're going, other places with your company vehicle." And so they pulled it up and they had all these other locations. And he said, "Can you please explain?" Because of course they're thinking like maybe like a bar or something.
Right, right.
And he said, "Can you please explain all these stops you're making after these jobs?" And I said, "Those are Toys R Us's and KB Toys." And he was like,
KB
"Get out
Toys.
of here."
Wow. Yeah.
You know, he just he looked at me because of course I think they were thinking it was like a bar or something.
Right.
And when I said KB or Toys R Us, he said, "Oh my God."
Yeah, that must have been a fun laugh in the room.
Yeah.
That's great. All right. This is, I favorite dry pipe valve.
Viking by far.
What model?
Uh, just the one that you can put the handlebar in there and just pop a
Yep.
clapper right down.
Yep. F1.
That's the one I've always used, and it's
Yeah,
just
F1, F2.
yeah, something about that. It's so reliable. I don't have many issues with it, and so many of the I think sometimes some of these we try to
Yeah.
we're specialize the system, the valve, and it just makes it more complicated. I actually just did a training on just that very thing because sometimes these new dry valves have the water priming line,
Yeah.
which is great, but it's the number one issue when someone says, "Hey,
Oh
I
yeah.
got everything shut down, but I still hear water running," and I'm like, "You didn't close the priming line," and they're like, "Oh, that's what that was," and I'm like, "Yep," and it's like, so I think you can over-engineer some of these, and a Viking valve to me is just so simple. It's just pop in, clapper down, and you keep on going.
Yeah, I think manufacturers get on the side of install. That's where they make their money, install, right?
Yeah,
But they don't always take in the account of service and inspection and maintenance. And I don't know, hopefully that changes. I think it may be starting to. But just the materials of the valve, that valve when I worked for Viking, I think we had to replace some clappers that were from the 1940s, somewhere in New
yeah.
York City. I forgot where it was. Might have been an airport or something. But it's from the 1940s. They still worked. They just needed a gasket replacement. And it was just like, oh wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, because even some of the newer dry valves, I feel bad because I had a friend of mine send me like a video of one of them how to set it up, and I responded to them. I was literally just like, "Oh my gosh!" I wrote down like 15 steps. Some of them were almost the number of steps you have to remember for all the different valve and actuators and things you have to work on. It's just you're engineering a device that it's so easy you're gonna miss something or forget something. And you get some of the older dry valves were just very simple. You clapper down, water on top of it, and it's just there. And I guess that's part of my mentality. Maybe people say I'm old school, but I like simple because I used to do those service calls at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't have the ability to watch a video on how to reset stuff. And so
Right.
a Viking valve to me was just so simple. Just clapper down, pop it, lock it, go.
Well, with the Viking, I think you could take hit the QR code and get a video of it now, or at
Yep,
least
yep.
that was a. I started my career manufacturing the Tyco drive valve. Is probably I've probably brought that up too many times, but and that's a great valve as well. It's just I remember then going to Viking. I'm like, oh man, this thing's it's a tank, but it's not going anywhere. So, and that's gonna be there 20 years down the line, easy.
Yep. Yep.
So, well, cool. Thanks, Matt, for joining the podcast today. I know it was a little bit of everything and kind of talking about kind of how you're influencing the fire protection community. I guess tell everybody where we can find you on social media and any contact info.
Facebook and LinkedIn. You just go look on there, and it's I'm if you go in those groups, the other thing too with a lot of the groups is they're private groups. So whatever you talk in there or chat in there is not going to see on your regular feed. So no one's going to be like, seeing what's going on,
Right.
Um, so just get onto Facebook or LinkedIn, and you'll see me pop up. I get a lot of comments. I get a lot of questions. And again, I love it, because I try to help out people. And probably one of the biggest questions I get, and it's just a cool quick story to end the taping, is on LinkedIn. My kind of like my nickname is Maddie, and people ask me where that came from. And it was at one of my companies, FLSA, Jack Medovich. If you know,
Yeah.
if you know,
Yeah.
I was having, I was the inspections manager. I had like, 40, some people under me. We were in the warehouse, had everybody, going through a training session. I was, the manager up on the front, talking to all my technicians and helping them out. And, you're trying to, try to put off that bravado of like, hey, I'm the, not only like the big chief, but like, hey, I'm here to help you guys. I'm the boss, whatever. And then all of a sudden out of nowhere, Jack goes, hey, good job, Maddie. And like, it was one of those nicknames. I didn't know he was going to call me that. And all of a sudden, all my guys go, Maddie? Oh, okay. And I was like, my face got like blood red, because I was like, where did that come from? Because, most of us were trying to have like that, strong, bravado type, outside exterior.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and when he dropped that Maddie, it was just like everybody in the group was just like looking at me and just started laughing. And I was like, I don't know where that came from. Just, you know,
That's funny.
and of course that just kind of stuck. And then people started calling me, hey, what's up, Maddie? And I'm like,
That's good though. I mean, you obviously you're known through those channels before, so it's good to be known, and I think social media is a great way to do that. Kind of a personal brand behind it too.
oh yeah, yeah, I enjoy it. Like I said, just knowing the fact that if I can help change someone's direction or help them put them in the right direction, or give them some guidance that will help them if they're looking for a new role or a new position. I
Yep.
mean, that's why I do it, because again, I'm trying to showcase that there are positive leaders out there that will help you out. And again, that's why I get asked so many questions daily. It's crazy. And if I can ever monetize it, yeah, I'll be okay. But right now, I just enjoy knowing that I'm
Yeah.
helping people. So
Money's not always everything. Sometimes you got to feel good about what you're doing, right? I
oh,
think
yeah,
that's a big part of life.
yeah. I think probably the biggest callback I enjoy is when someone will reach out to me after like a year or two and be like, hey man, thank you so much for your feedback, it helped me so much. And that means a lot, to know that people didn't have to reach back out after I gave them the advice or gave them the input. And it's actually how I got to where I am today. I helped a gentleman, and with some nice set and stuff, and people just always will reach out and say thank you so much because what you did for me. I help people get their CFPS, the Certified Fire Protection Specialist, and people will reach out like 2 years later and be like, because of what you did, give me the advice and going for it. I'm either making really good money now, or I'm in a really good position, and it's like that makes you feel good. It makes you feel good at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's important, and it's worth more than dollars. Is that just that good feeling if you're doing something uh good for somebody or the community. So,
Yep,
well, thanks, Matt, for stopping on. I'll get this all prepped up and look to chatting more and being involved in some of these Facebook groups.
awesome, Drew. Thanks.
This was episode 52 of the Fire Protection Podcast, powered by Inspect Point. I want to thank Matt Bass again for coming on, talking Star Wars, all the fun fire protection stuff. So appreciate him. We'll definitely have him on again. He's a nice, neutral, independent source within the fire protection industry. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it, and see you here again soon. Thanks.